Here we go.
Hi everyone, thanks John. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, my name's Nav. Nav is the short one for my my odd name, Navino Evans. Strange combo of weird and normal names. My first presentation during lockdown, so it's kind of strange adjusting to this thing of I need to be presentable from waist up and not needing a tiny room that lower down. But so it's quite good fun. But basically, yeah, so I want to sort of introduce a little bit about Histropedia, and because it's already sort of it's had a bit of a mention, and we are kind of at a crossroads in terms of the fact that we're now developing Mark II of Histropedia. And so what's currently online is very much in transit as we move towards this new version, which is basically far more Wikidata intensive. So really that was the beginning of my story, and how I fell in love with Wikidata. Was because Histropedia was initially based on what can we extract from Wikipedia articles in trying to create a kind of timelines on every topic in history. And of course, Wikidata sprouted up in the meantime and took away a lot of the issues that we were facing, as in how do you deal with semi-structured data? How do you actually get the kind of information that you need to visualize the sum of all history on a timeline? And timelines were our major focus because it felt like there's a lot of maps, a lot of things. And really what I wanted was, I want to be able to, just like I can on Google Earth, zoom into any place on Earth. I want to be able to zoom into any time or period, or indeed zoom out to see a kind of broad overview of a topic in a way that I can sort of, or, you know, kind of very quickly pretend that you know a lot about it by seeing the major aspects of it and then zoom in and go into more detail. I'm just going to share my screen because today, because of this transitory thing and the fact that there is, we're looking at sort of connecting heritage for Histropedia, the major focus was on not recreating knowledge and using the sum of all human knowledge, you know, as described in Wikimedia projects, from Wikipedia, Wikimedia Commons for the media, but now primarily the major gem among them all is Wikidata, because that's the backbone that drives the whole thing. So I'm going to talk about some of the work this has led me to in terms of facilitating data imports and helping link cultural heritage organizations and content to Wikidata, because basically everything that we can link up, Histropedia can then use, and other apps and services or incredible things that people create can also be linked up as well. So I'm just going to try and share my screen now, and let me just make sure I'm picking the right one. Is that visible at the moment? Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So that's the sort of tiny URL for this, but I'll post a link to these slides because they have a few links in them. So firstly, I'm going to kind of start a little bit with one of the challenges that comes up all the time, which is basically, how do you actually track these imports? How do you keep track of what's going on, not duplicate work that everyone's doing, and basically generally just keep on top of the process of maybe trying to synchronize data when, say, new data gets released every year, as is the case with UNESCO. There's a lot of sort of general publications and extra data constantly being updated and released. And so initially, when I started working with the Wikimedian in residence at UNESCO, this caused major headaches because it was very difficult to deal with this changing data set. So one of the projects that we developed early on, just to help us and everyone along the way, was this concept of a sort of a data import tracking area. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because it's very much a work in progress, but I would recommend that anyone who kind of wants to look at importing data, it might not be lots of data that's kind of copyrighted or anything like that. You could be looking at just importing, say, some unique identifiers from your collection. But this would be a really good place to start if you are looking at something like that. And basically it enables you to kind of create a new page for a data set and have a place to start discussing with the community. How would I deal with this data? What can I do in Wikidata? It's very difficult for an outsider to come in and understand how the community works. And so this is hopefully a way to sort of bridge the gap a little bit. So that's kind of the challenges, and there are lots of them, but I wanted to start with that because it comes up so often. But now kind of moving on to just some examples of the sort of power that linking everything up gives you. And you've seen so many incredible examples from the previous speakers, you know, including thanks to everyone before Shani, etc., with a bunch of, and Jason with some Histropedia stuff involved already. But I'm just going to focus on some of the things that have really come up when we've been working with the data as really important. So looking at these points just briefly, adding missing Wikipedia articles across all languages. And you saw Shani had a kind of a work dashboard showing this kind of thing. But essentially, once something's in Wikidata, it's incredibly easy to basically just query and generate a list of how well is this covered, say in English, in Arabic, any language you want. You can just suddenly analyze how well this is covered, and better still, it appears on people's to-do lists. If it's missing, it may well get created because it's getting discovered. The others have been talked about a lot in terms of linkage and investigating differences, which is often really crucial to research questions and, you know, what people actually. Sometimes, you know, you want things to agree, but other times it's the differences that are where all the really interesting stuff to find out is, you know, like why are there differences maybe in different countries and their view on history of a certain topic. Creating the visualizations, which you've seen quite a lot of, and I'll show a couple more now. The beauty of that is that it's kind of free, you know, it's free to use all these other visualizations that are built into Wikidata and built into apps that are developed on top of Wikidata. And just generally combining it with knowledge that you would not be able to store yourself because it's just impractical. You know, some of the points from Martin was making previously about it's not in everyone's remit to store data about books, and you certainly won't be, if you are storing stuff about books or people, you certainly won't be storing things about planets or chemicals or all of these other things that you might want to bring into the story. So I'm going to go and do a few live demos. I've got some kind of these are probably not going to work, but I've got them sort of linked and pre-made just in case. But I wanted to run it live because that was a live query running. That was the time it took to run this query. And this is about an imported language data set from UNESCO about endangered languages. So each of the colors represents a different level of endangerment. And if I say click on the severely endangered languages or say critically endangered, I can zoom in and, you know, interestingly, you're finding out United States of America is leading in this area, which surprised me when I saw that. And in fact, they're the leaders for critically endangered and extinct as well, which is very, very surprising. But basically, this is a visualization that UNESCO wouldn't have been able to make themselves. They weren't really interested in visualizing the data, but it makes it more accessible. So I thought that was really cool. It's just when it's one of many, by the way, the query service has a lot of cool visualizations available. This is just one that I wanted to show because I just like the fact this isn't actually using the query service. There's another little tool that this is based on. And it's just showing that the connections between languages. So all of these endangered languages, which ones were derived in other languages, what's the tree of connection between them, which is such an amazing thing for a linguist to explore. And just moving on to the linkage, this is now, we've imported World Heritage Sites, but this is a much more interesting use of the data. We're now finding paintings which depict a certain category of World Heritage Sites. So the category I've gone for here is masterpieces of human creative genius. And basically, sorry, that's the wrong one. Let me just get back there for a minute. So, and the beauty of it, so look, we're getting the Taj Mahal and we're getting all these different entities, and it's just a really, and we can see who was the artist and where's the image on Commons. And this is just one level of connection. You know, we're going from World Heritage to paintings, but we could then go into what about the creators of paintings who paint World Heritage Sites, and we could explore that. The possibilities are limitless and of course only dependent on what it is that you're trying to discover and if the linkage is there in Wikidata, obviously. So just moving on, I had to fit in some timelines, obviously. So this is just illustrates something interesting because World Heritage Sites, UNESCO, they themselves store the dates at which they, inscribe a site into the World Heritage List. But they definitely don't normally have information about about when these things were actually created. So some things are natural, like Mount Etna here, and you can see that's 300,000 years ago. But I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This data has come primarily from Wikidata, because even the stuff that UNESCO does talk about in free text, they certainly don't have it in structured form. So we can sort of browse and visualize and zoom in a little bit. So there's the Great Pyramid. And you can see all these filters on the side are all based on Wikidata as well. This is all just a query giving back some data. So I could say focus in on, there's Japan, and these are just all of the World Heritage Sites from Japan, and you can go and explore them, find the oldest ones. And just quickly, I threw in some other color code options which are just based on the query, and so you can go to criteria and say, I want to look at the masterpiece of human creative genius that we were looking at before, and there you have it. You can just focus in on that little bit of area, or by type, whatever else you wanted to look at. But one last crucial thing that I want to see, hopefully I'm not going too far over time, one last thing I really wanted to show you and just to emphasize again, like something that you've seen just previously, is the multilingual nature of Wikidata. If I want to, and you see right here in this query, it just says EN for English. And if I wanted to say, change that to Japanese, and I'll have another EN just to fall back to English if there isn't Japanese. And I can just sort of create that timeline. It will only take a second, but I think there's one I prepared earlier just here. And so this is now me focusing in on everything, but it's in Japanese. And granted, the sort of user interface is not in Japanese because the tool is a bit basic at the moment. But I can sort of, focus in on my Japanese World Heritage Sites in Japanese. And crucially, what I link to is up to me. But in this case, I've decided to sort of link to the World Heritage Site itself. So if I double click, you actually get straight to the UNESCO World Heritage page, but it could have been a Wikipedia article, it could have been whatever you like. And that's the beauty of linking it all up and having that power to just query it and show just a particular story or find a connection that you didn't really know existed before. So I think that covers really everything I wanted to go over. So yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen a moment.
Great, thank you very much. One of the questions that come in relates to possible problems arising from the uneven nature of the data, Western bias in the data, underrepresented groups. How much of a problem is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a problem, but one of the beauties of Wikidata is that it allows conflicting information to be stored at the same time. So where you have got things that don't agree and things that appear to be biased, I mean, obviously you can't, there's historical bias that you really can't deal with. We can't sort of do anything about lack of records and, lack of information about achievements by women past a certain date. But basically what it does do is it's the first step to seeing that bias, because previously it was not visible. Like people didn't really understand really what was the gender gap going in Wikipedia. If I look at one particular area like sports people, how many how does it compare in terms of female sports people compared to male sports people, or indeed these other like you're saying, this sort of Western view on the world and those kind of biased opinions. They couldn't be quantified other than with really, really rudimentary and crude methods of just saying, like, I assume it's a man because there was lots of he's, or whatever it is. The difference is now it can be reported on, it can be visualized. You can literally say, okay, we know that the references, you can say, we know that the references are coming from places that are generally located over here in the US or wherever they are. It opens the door to the analysis to actually at least highlight the gaps. The filling those gaps is down to the community, and it's down to people who decide they want to use this data and make it better. So really, the community just would be their advice would be, yeah, please, if you see these, if you found one or you found an area that needs improvement, then come and engage with the community, let them know, and they will cherish the opportunity to fix it or do whatever they can to plug the gap.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll now hand back to John for the last time to introduce our final speaker.
Great, thank you. So our final speaker of the session is Harrison Pym, who's a data scientist at the Wellcome Collection. So,
hello. I need to share my screen. Let's do that. There we go. Is everyone seeing that?